Ryan Thogmartin making waves with style, disrupt the tradition, going the extra mile. A marketing master and influencer bold. In a field once quiet, his stories retold. With flair and fresh ideas, he's casting a net. Join us saying, welcome to PodCasket.
I do have to say though, this was kind of random. So my daughter went to just like her friend's birthday party on Saturday, and my wife's there. She's talking to these folks, and she's like, "Oh, where are you guys from?" It's like Ohio, and yeah. And she's like, "Wait, what's your last name?" My wife's like, "Funk," and she's like, "So is your husband like Curtis Funk?" She's like, "Yeah," and she's like, "He knows the Thogmartins."
Oh, get out!
Yeah, and it's like, what? So her name was Mackenzie Wilson.
Olson,
now,
yeah,
Olson now,
Wilson. Yeah. She went to school with Kaylee. They were in the same class.
Yeah, that's what she was saying. They're like besties. So yeah, that's was crazy. Yeah,
because they live like Farmington or something, so they live close to you somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know where they live. So it was her sister's house. It was her sister's daughter that was the birthday party. But yeah, it was just so random.
That's wild. Small world.
Totally.
Cool. I'll tell
All right,
Kaylee.
man.
That's funny.
Yeah, you got to tell her. So, I mean, the premise of PodCasket, we got to interview the legends that have built death care into what we have today. So this is not about me talking, right? It's going to be about you and hearing your story. And so for me, this is exciting because you and I have known each other for 17 years or something now. And I mean,
maybe even maybe longer than that. I don't know. I can't do math. So yeah, close to 17 years. That makes sense. Yeah.
But I'd love to just kind of dig out some stories here that, none of us have heard that have been in the industry for a long time. So first off, you just got to start from the beginning telling your story. And then I'm going to try to chime in and ask you questions along the way. But if you just want to start, where were you born? Family, siblings, all that.
I'm a Kentuckian. I think that's what they say. Kentuckian. I was born in Lexington, Kentucky, way back in 1982. So my first words were "Go Blue." So I've been a Kentucky Wildcats basketball fan since I could talk. I think my first Kentucky game was the Final Four when I was 20 months old. At Rupp Arena. So, I've got parents and two younger brothers. So I was the oldest of three boys. I was the least ornery, for sure. And we weren't in Kentucky long, moved to Ohio. My parents originally from Ohio, moved back to Ohio when I was 20 months old. And I think, really probably the most significant moment of my birth. I'm going to go, if we go all the way back, I was, I created an outline for you of some highlight moments, I guess, in my life of just, which was kind of cool, therapeutic for me to kind of go back through just some markers. But I think the most important decision I've ever made in my entire life happened when I was 4 years old. It was a summer evening. I remember being in the upstairs of the house we were living in Lancaster, Ohio. It was around 7:30. I remember this because that was my bedtime, which was kind of jacked up. Summertime, my parents put me to bed at 7:30 in the evening, still sunny out. But I accepted Jesus at 4 years old. And I mean, that decision, There isn't a single decision I've made in my life since then that has had the significance that decision has. So that's literally shaped my entire life.
And how do you do that? When you're 4, how did you do that?
Man, my dad was a pastor of a little church. So my parents, we were raised in the church. It's just what we did. Man, I feel like I spent most of my time in a church or a Christian school growing up. My dad was, when I was young, little, before I was in school, around that time, my dad was, I don't know what his position was. He's a teacher or something at a little Christian school. So I would go to school with him a lot. Those were the kids I hung out with, were the kids that were in class with him. And that we were always at church. The church we went to was right next door to the school. So it was like, I spent my week, around believers, and, my parents would read Bible stories to me every night. So like, it's, you look back on gratitude, and I think like, regardless of what relationships and things are now, as we get older with family and things, like I can look at, like my parents introduced me to Jesus. Like that's dope. Like that's really like, as a parent now, I mean, you've got kids, I've got kids. I think that, that instilling faith, like, is our greatest responsibility as parents. I say it, my wife and I all the time, like our kids are dope. They're awesome. We've really got lucky. I mean, most of the people in death care know my kids because they've been going to conventions since they were, before they could walk, but, really like engaged in a convention since they were 3 and 4 years old. And all the time people are like, man, how'd your kid, like, you got such great kids. They're doing amazing things. How did you do it? And it's like, man, we partnered with Jesus. Like, it's sure we're stewarding the gift of having children the best that we can. Like, they're not ours, they're God's children. And we've been tapped and been fortunate enough to be the two people that God said, hey, this is your responsibility, steward it well. And, it's been that partnership. So I go back and look at 4 years old. That was it. I remember laying in bed, raising my hand. I had a tent bed. I don't know if they even still have those, but like, it was like this tent that just like went around my bed and hooked to the mattress. And I remember laying in there, and my dad was saying my bedtime prayers, and I asked him about accepting Jesus into my heart. And, that's when it happened. We said the prayer right there. I mean, it is my most vivid memory that I have of my childhood.
That's so cool, man. That's way cool. And obviously had a deep impression. You remember it so well. Like, I got little kids, and my 3-year-old right now, it's funny. Like, if I put him to bed every night, he wants to watch this video on YouTube. It's a Bible video. And he says this, I'm trying to remember how he says it. He says, like, let's watch the video of Jesus where they scrapes him's back.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, he's getting whipped. And then, the crucifixion, like he just like, he wants to watch that all the time. And it's cool. It's cool. It's cool to hear your story, because I can sort of relate with that with my little boys and watching them and just their interest at a young age. So yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to ask you more about that, because I'm curious, like, as we go through your kind of into your teenage years and stuff, just like how that, if you held on to that, or if there was a time where it kind of slipped. I know you're all in now, but like, yeah, I'd be curious as you kind of get through your story, if there was a time where that kind of changed for you. But
for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, so it's like, that was the biggest decision. And I think like the next real marker for me, as I kind of just look like that was hugely impressionable. We moved from, that town, close to my grandparents, like 30 minutes away, a few years later. And, I think I started school in like 1988, I think was, if I was doing the math right, like that was kindergarten. And my parents tried to homeschool me, which was kind of funny because my kids have never gone to public school. They've been homeschooled from the jump. They've never wanted to go to public school. I actually did want to go to public school because I had a cousin that was the same age as me. She went to public school, and I had met, a couple friends. Just, I think my mom hung out with their moms, and like they were all going to school. And our house that we lived in at the time was like right next door to the school. And so my parents tried to homeschool me because my dad was, a teacher at a Christian school and then an educator, and had actually wrote a book on homeschooling and teaching how to teach your kids to read and different things of that nature. So like homeschooling was kind of in his DNA, I guess. And so they tried to homeschool me, and it just didn't work. I think I was homeschooled for like 6 weeks and then went to public school. I loved sports. Like that was probably another big marker in my life, was just, if it wasn't for sports, I would have hated school. Like I didn't like anything to do with school. Like I knew from an early age that like it was the social aspect for me. It was the connection to people. So loved sports, and I wanted to go to school so I could play sports. Like back then, you couldn't be homeschooled and then do things in the public school system. Now it's like it's a free for all. I think. Like
What sports were you playing?
At that age, it was just t-ball and so baseball and basketball. And then when I was 12, my dad was like, "Hey, they're starting this youth golf program. Like golf's something you could play your whole life. I've never learned how to play golf." I'm like, "Man, golf seems so stupid and boring. Like, wow, it just no." But I did it, and shoot, golf is the thing that I play the most now. It's the least taxing on my body. You hit a certain age, and getting beat around on a basketball court is not fun. So I started off playing baseball and basketball, and just love sports. That's I got decent grades because my parents would be mad if I didn't, and so I could play sports. But I think public school was good for me. I look back now at school. It's helped shape just now having kids that don't go to public school. Like there's this. I don't know. I learned a lot of things I probably didn't need to learn, but I also learned the communication side of being able to mix with people, confidence in communicating with people. And it's cool now, like having kids that have never gone to public school, just like we've been insanely intentional for them not to be weird homeschool kids. And that's what we get asked the most is like, how do your kids not so weird? And we've plugged them into so many different things. My wife says all the time, she's like, I didn't have a Louis Vuitton bag for a long time because it was just the kids. Like the kids were, they were the accessory. They went everywhere with us. I can think like on a hand, like 5 times we actually got a babysitter and went and did something. Our kids have just gone to business dinners. They've gone not out of like guilt, out of just, I don't know. It was easier to bring them along, and the value they got out of it was insane. So I think, for me, school was great because of sports. But I'm gonna jump to 1993 because I get asked quite a bit, like, when did fashion become something that you cared about? And I got to tell you, I was the least fashionable. People see me now and they're like, have you always been this way? Absolutely not. Like, I really didn't embrace fashion until I met my wife. Growing up, like, we had everything we needed, we'll put it that way. And I remember 1993, I think Reebok pumps came out in like 84. I believe the first Reebok pump was a basketball shoe. And then I remember Michael Chang. I played tennis. I never played tennis in school because the school I went to didn't have a tennis team. But my grandparents had a clay tennis court at their house, and we lived right next door to my grandparents. So I played tennis. I watched a lot of tennis from like 3 years old up. We just played tennis all the time because we had it at our house. But Michael Chang had tennis shoes that came out that were Reebok pumps. And so instead of the pump being a basketball, it was a tennis ball. And I wanted Reebok pumps. And I can tell you where I was standing when my dad's like, yeah, no, we can't get Reebok pumps. Like, I think the article I read is they were the most expensive shoe, like the most expensive sports shoe ever. Like, I think when they released in 84, I think they were $170. So they were the most expensive shoe by $100. I think the most expensive basketball shoe at that time was $70 per the article I read, which was ESPN. So I'm thinking that it's true. My dad was like, yeah, no, we can't, we're not getting a $170 pair of shoes. And he gave me a number, and I'm like, well, because there was a kid on my basketball team that had them. I said, well, he's got them. He's like, well, his dad probably makes X. And in my mind, like, that number became it. So I was 12 years old, and I got this like salary number kind of ingrained in my head. And like, that was it for me from 12 years old on. Like, I'm like, okay, the goal is to make that amount of money because then I can get any shoe that I wanted. And like, that kind of birthed this like entrepreneurial spirit. Like, I was we lived in a really small house, and I was on the right off the porch on the sidewalk. And I can remember when my dad was standing, and he just said, "Man, we can't afford those shoes." And I'm like, "Well, so-and-so's got him." He's like, "Well, his dad probably makes X." And it wasn't a crazy number. It was like $52,000 a year. That's what this kid's dad made. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It's just what my dad said. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, $52,000. That's it. Like if I could get to the point where I can make that a year, like life is Gucci. And so like it birthed this drive to want to get something. And then finding a means to an end. And so like that birthed something inside of me. And shortly after that, 1994 was probably where the entrepreneur in me was really kind of uncovered, and something clicked. And so I was 12 years old. My mom got this catalog, and the catalog would you could buy wrapping paper, thank you card. I believe it was Currents was the name of the catalog. I'm not 100%, don't quote me on that, but I think it was Currents. And in the back of the magazine, they had all these prizes you could win. And so you could sign up, and you could go door to door, and you could sell wrapping paper, all the things in this catalog. And for every dollar, you got a point, and then you could cash the points in for, you got a prize. And there was a gumball fish tank in the back of this magazine, and I wanted that gumball fish tank. Now, you could buy that gumball fish tank, just straight up, order it, buy it, it's yours. Or you could sell wrapping paper and earn it. And when I went to my parents for the gumball fish tank, they're like, yeah, no, if you want it, you're going to have to figure out a way to earn it. And so I did, man. I went door to door. I sold wrapping paper to every old lady within, walking distance of my house. And I got enough to get the gumball fish tank. And I remember when that gumball fish tank came, going, okay, this means this is significant. There are things that people need, and you can be the conduit to get them what they need. And there is a reward when you add value to somebody. And so there was this entrepreneur in me that was really kind of uncovered. I didn't know what it meant. Entrepreneurship was not something that was discussed in my household. I mean, my dad has a PhD in leadership. He was a teacher for almost 40 years, private and public school and online school. So college was just ingrained. There was no option not to go to college. But I didn't know what this meant. Had someone told me at 12 years old that hey, you can just go create a business and not go to college, I would have punted sports, punted school, and just figured it out. And so, I mean, from that point on, entrepreneurship, how do I make a few bucks, whether it was delivering pizzas, without my parents knowing, because my mom worked at the insurance place in town, and your car wasn't covered under insurance if you were a delivery person. So I would have to sneak around and on the side, just hustle to deliver some pizzas when I needed a few bucks. And, Sam's Club. So I think I don't know, I haven't seen a Sam's Club living out West. So it's the East Coast equivalent of Costco. And, you can buy bulk stuff there. So I would take the money I made from pizzas. I would give it to my mom to go buy bulk candy, and I would take that bulk candy to school. And so I was the guy in New York City with the trench coat with watches, but it was just gum and candy bars. And so I made money doing that during school. I would being into sports, NCAA tournament, March Madness. I would run brackets out of my locker, and I would keep a percentage of people would buy a bracket, and bracket was $15. I kept $5. That was the deal. I put the whole thing on, organized it all, and so I would make money. And just finding ways to make money was just kind of in the DNA. There was always a crafty way, but there was a turning point in my senior year of high school. People see me now and okay, wow, this guy speaks on stages. He creates all kinds of content. That was absolutely not me. I was insanely afraid, just would get nervous. Even before basketball, as much as I loved basketball, I would have to take nerve pills before a basketball game. I was just nervous to be in front of people. In my senior year of high school, like if I look back at education, my view on education isn't super high. And if I look back on my education, like that senior year of high school, I had a speech class that I was required to take as an elective, 6 weeks, and it probably it's had the greatest impact of anything I've ever done in education. Like that 6 week had the greatest impact that I've ever like on my life from education. And my English teacher, I'm still in contact with her like through Facebook, and like she had the greatest impact on me because I had to do this 6 week speech class, and she came to me and she's like, after my first speech, I was insanely afraid. Like I think I threw up in the bathroom before I went into class because I had to give this speech. But we had 6 weeks, every week we had to give a different style of speech. And so she taught me like how to speak in front of people, how to create an outline, you know, how to build with a story, deliver, like all these things. So it was like massively impactful. And in that speech class, like it also helped me in like professing my faith. I was pretty quiet about my faith, but we had to do a persuasive speech that year. And I think it was the last week, it was persuasive. And so I read the book, Lord, Liar, Lunatic. And basically God was either who he said he was absolutely blasphemy, or he was completely crazy. And so I did a persuasive speech on like that God was who he said he was based on, you know, these things in the Bible. And it was cool. Like I got to have a lot of cool faith conversations with classmates and like go really deep on my faith. And it was the first time publicly I really professed my faith. I mean, you know, we grew up same time. You didn't have outlets like YouTube or Facebook or like, you know, it was either inviting somebody to church or inviting them to youth group. That was it. And so that was really cool. And I had this plan at that point that I was going to go play college basketball. I had a couple D1 scholarship offers. And I gave that speech. It was a Friday. It was the night of our home opener my senior year, or the night before our home opener of my senior year. And I shattered my ankle in 3 places in practice that night. So my senior year.
You graduated what, 2001?
Yeah, graduated
so
June 2001.
You shatter your ankle before your game opener. And so would you have been playing with LeBron? I mean, I'm like pulling this
no
ahead. Was this the same high school, or was he a different high school?
No, completely different high school. We would have never played against each other, different divisions. So I would have been I think senior,
because he's class of 2003 like I am. I mean, I remember hearing about him.
Yeah, I was like a sophomore when he was like 8th grader. Or no, I was a senior when he was a sophomore.
You would have been senior when he was a sophomore. Yeah.
So we would not have played. We would have never saw each other. Different divisions. I was a school of, I think when I graduated, there were 46 kids in my graduating class.
Whoa.
So we were tiny. Our entire high school, our entire school, K through 12, the entire district was less than 700 people. So we were the smallest division in the state of Ohio. LeBron was like a Division II, so second largest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So no, we wouldn't have played against each other, but like that moment. So it's wild to like look back now and see how God had this, like, I always say like God's thumb was on my life the entire time. Like I can map back to like 4 years old, accepting Jesus, all the way up through of like where, like things that didn't make sense in that time period. Like, you know, 5th grade basketball, my 5th grade basketball coach has been my life coach and like somebody that's had an insane impact on my life for the last 8 years. But he was my 5th grade basketball coach, and I hadn't talked to him for 20 years, and we got reconnected through Facebook.
Oh, no way.
Radical impact. And I actually prayed that his twin brother would be my coach because I knew him. And so like just the way God weaves those stories together. So I give this, like the first time I really publicly professed my faith to like peers and have all these great conversations in my brain. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to college at this little D2 school in Indiana. I'm going to play basketball. Life is going to be great. I'll go into something business related and break my ankle. And like back then, if you didn't have a highlight reel, like you were filming stuff on VHS, you're sending it to somebody that can rip it to a DVD, edit it, like all this stuff, and then you're mailing it to coaches. It was like, I had no contact with any coaches after that. I only played 2 games my senior year of high school at the end of the year, and it was like just got to pop in and anyway. So like sports was over. And the day before I graduated high school, there was a girl that was in my class. We had an internet service provider in our town, and her mom had been sick, and she hadn't been to school, and she worked at the internet service provider. So like I popped in, and I'm like, just checking on your mom. And there was a guy that was in there, and she says the guy like, hey, he's a jock, plays sports. He'd probably be interested in what you do. And this guy pitched me on this idea. He's like, if you're an athlete, you know how hard it is to get discovered by coaches. And most high school websites don't cover sports. Like K-12 doesn't cover sports. Newspaper, will cover high school sports, but it's not great. And he's like, I'm starting a company where we build high school sports websites and we cover the athletes. And then he's like, we'll do it for free for the school. And then we'll sell ads to local businesses. And it did, 2001, like banner ads were like this new thing. Like the internet was still kind of this, like, I don't even think Dreamweaver 7 wasn't even out. And that was kind of like a game changer in building websites. Right. So I'm like, cool. Like, what do you need, man? And he was like, well, I need a salesperson. I'm like, shoot, I just did this persuasive speech class. Like I could do sales, piece of cake. Mm-hmm. So I partnered with him, and that in itself was like this wild thing. Like I wanted to go, so when basketball dried up, that wasn't an option. It was like had to go to college. There was no option not to go to college. And I wanted to go to school out of state. My parents were like, if you want to go to out of state, then you got to figure out a way to pay for first semester and then get enough scholarships to cover second semester, because we're not paying, triple for you to go out of state when you could go down the road to a community college, but you're required to go to college. So I made enough money. What was this
website called? Like, what was this company that you guys were doing
the
called?
Company is no longer it was Memphis Shade, which
Memphis
was sketchy
Shade.
in itself. Memphis Shade. And the reason the guy picked it is because he rode motorcycles, like street bikes. And Memphis Shades was the most popular street bike windshield. They were a company that made these tinted windshields. And so his thought was, if I'm Memphis Shade, then a lot of people will accidentally find this website going to Memphis Shades. And a lot of people that ride street bikes also like sports. And so there would be this exposure for this company. It was wild, man. It was, for me, it taught me how to sell. So I immediately was making more money doing sales the day after I graduated high school than, that $52,000 a year to get any shoe that you wanted, became a reality within a couple weeks of graduating high school. And for me, then school became what's the freaking point? This is crazy. And so I went to school. I made enough money in 9 weeks to pay for all of first semester and most of second semester on my own.
What school was that?
West Virginia University. And I was basically I knew a girl that went there. So then I'm like, oh yeah, that's where I should go. And the dumbest reason on the history of the planet to ever pick a college. But it was cool. I went to school, but the wild thing was I was learning about building a business. I was learning, I was partnered with this guy. I was also learning a lot about having partners and morality when you choose a partner. And there was a lot of life lessons I was learning at an age where I had been sheltered. I had never really been out of this little tiny town that I grew up in. So it was culture shock. I'm traveling all over Ohio. I'm selling ads to all these local businesses. I'm learning, where banner ads go on a website to get the most clicks. I'm learning landing pages and, all these things that I had no idea would be so influential later on in life and what we're doing now. And one really cool thing is there were two things I would do any town that I would go into. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, in 4 years of being, 3 years being partnered in this company, and being an owner, I never paid for a hotel, and I was on a road every single week of the year. And the first thing I would do when I'd pop into a town, I would go and I would do an ad trade with the hotel. Like hotels always have empty rooms, and they have allotment of rooms that they're allowed to like trade and discount like crazy. So like the first thing I do, I was go in, I would get my hotel for the week. So I trade an ad on the side for the hotel. And then the next business I would find every single time was a funeral home, because funeral homes always said yes.
Wow.
And so before I knew anything about death care, like I was insanely comfortable cold calling and just walking in to funeral homes and learning about how funeral homes supported the community. They always would buy an ad, and like without fail. And so I would like drive by, I would profile the funeral home to see, based on the building and how nice the building was, I would guess, because there were no funeral home websites at this point, and I would guess which one did the most business. And then that's the one I would go into, and they would always buy an ad. It was like just clockwork. You're like, get my hotel for the week, and then go sell my first ad, get a win on Monday. And like that set the tone for the rest of the week. So that was really cool. But go to college, run this company from the dorm room. Like I learned how to cold call. I racked up like insane long distance bills. So like we would partner with a high school in Ohio. Like I'm calling the athletic director. I'm like giving these pitches. They're like, yeah, cool, let's meet. And I would schedule on weekends to drive back to Ohio from West Virginia. And I would go meet athletic directors on Saturday morning, because regardless of the time of year it was, like there was always something happening on a Saturday morning, whether it was, a baseball game, a basketball game, football, whatnot. They were always in their office on Saturday mornings. And so I would pop in, I would give them my pitch, we'd sign them up. And then my sales guy would, pop in on a Monday, and they'd start selling ads in the community. And go back to my dorm room, and I would get an athletic program from the athletic director, and I would start cold calling every single business in that program and tell them so I had the script, like all of these things that like I'm learning all these skills, but at the same time, I was partnered with somebody that just morally, we didn't mesh whatsoever. This guy like taught me a lot about sales, but I also learned like how not to treat employees, how not to run a company, how not to treat customers. Like I learned a lot. I saw the negative side of being a partner with somebody in a business. And so I dropped out of school after my freshman year, was partners in that company for 2 more years, and then eventually sold out of my partnership and decided it was time to move on. And that's when death care became a reality.
So tell us how that happened now. How do you, that's
so
awesome. This is great. Cause like all these stories, these are like,
yeah, these are like all untold. No one's ever.
Well, hold on. Before we move on to death care, I think there's a misconception clearly in the space that we all thought you went to high school with LeBron. So what's your connection to LeBron? Let's talk about that.
I did not go to high school with LeBron. So building sports websites for high schools, we got access, like the way to fake a media pass back then, like no one ever wanted to go to a high school game as media until LeBron. Like LeBron completely flipped. Like a lot of people can hate on LeBron, but like seeing LeBron like I knew LeBron for almost 2 years. So junior, senior year of high school is when I was really connected with LeBron, when he was a junior and senior. And that connection came, we were working with a school in Columbus, Ohio that had 2 guys on their team that were recruited by Oklahoma to play D1 basketball. We worked with their high school. We were covering their sports team. They were playing in a tournament in Columbus against Akron St. Vincent St. Mary, which is the high school LeBron went to. I would call these promoters of these events, and I would get media passes. And I would say, hey, I'm with this company. We represent Brookhaven High School, and I need media passes for these games. And so like I would send them a link to our website. I'd send them a link to the school's website that we built. And, then you'd get a free media pass. And so this promoter was a super cool connection. He did 5 tournaments across the U.S. All 5 tournaments featured Akron St. Vincent St. Mary. Like so many people profited off of LeBron being like who LeBron was and how good he was. So this guy did 5 different tournaments across the country. This was the second one that he had done out of the 5. And so I called to get media passes, and he was like, what do you guys do? And I was telling him, he's like, look, we don't have a media company to cover the entire event. He's like, if I just get you a media pass for everything, will you cover every game and just send me all the photos that you get? And I was like, yeah, sure. Dope. So like the weird thing is now I'm sitting on the floor, like Brookhaven's playing Akron St. Vincent St. Mary. I have no connection with LeBron yet at this point. I'm sitting on the floor under the basket in Schottenstein's Arena in Columbus, Ohio, 22,000 people. It was the first time the arena had ever been sold out for a high school game. First time in Ohio is the most attended high school game in the state of Ohio at that point. And I'm sitting beside ESPN, and this guy's got this telephoto lens, and I've got a 3 megapixel Fuji point and shoot camera. Didn't know how, like ESPN showing me how to set white balance because like they're all connected to flashes. Like you're not allowed to have a flash on your camera. So they've got bulbs all around the arena that when they take a picture, the bulbs flash, and it's far enough away that it's not distracting to a player, but it provides this burst of light. And so like I learned to frame and try to anticipate when the good shot was going to happen so that I could just get the juice off of everybody else that was a real photographer. And we got connected with this promoter. So this promoter is like now flying me across the country to go like California and cover the next event he's having with LeBron, North Carolina, getting me on the team bus. And that's how I, got friends with LeBron, was just hanging around. I also learned the value of connection and proximity. And like when you've got something and you're around somebody of influence, but you don't treat them like they're this celebrity. Like it's cool now watching like the Starting 5 documentary that's on Netflix that follows LeBron and like 4 other players from like through the NBA season last year. And I was watching it last night with my kids, and there was a segment with LeBron where he's in like the training room getting massaged and like getting treatment and stuff. And he's like just joking around and he's cracking jokes and he's being funny. And I'm like, that LeBron, the way he is now at 39 in the NBA is exactly how he was at 17 years old. Like he was just a 17-year-old kid. And we're walking through restaurants and people were cussing at him and yelling at him like, yo, LeBron, where's your Hummer? And like the blinders that these kids had on, like to me, it was so cool to be next to like statistically the starting 5 of that team that LeBron was on that won the national championship. Statistically, all should have been in prison. Like we're just going statistically, like the coach they had, Coach Drew, like corralled these players and literally pulled out greatness and insane broken stories. They all lived in welfare housing. It like, that was the big red flag. Everybody probably the thing they remember the most about LeBron, even if you weren't in Ohio, you're following LeBron at that time, was the Hummer. Like LeBron getting this Hummer. And basically it was like, how does somebody that lives in welfare housing have a, at that point, $70,000 tricked out Hummer with suede and 2 PlayStations and, all these things. And, basically his mom was smart and she leveraged like, hey, my son's going to be in the NBA. You can build a relationship and you can approve me for this car on good faith. And, wow. And that's basically kind of how it happened. And like, it was 310 Motors out in LA that built the car for him. And like, they've interviewed the owner. He's like, we would have been stupid not to do that deal. Like, he's like, I financed it myself and, we handled it. Like, it was dumb not to build that relationship. So like seeing LeBron then and LeBron now, like the way people treated that team and just traveling with the team and got pretty tight. got really, really tight with LeBron. We were, his rookie year in Cleveland. I got to meet a lot of cool people. Got to meet Jay-Z and Ken Griffey Jr. and all these celebrities that would come to games. Julius Peppers, they would come into the locker room after the game. We were the only media company that ever got access to the locker room with LeBron. The security guards for the team. I would take pictures of the security guards with LeBron, and some of the security guards would bring their kids. They had 5 security guards that had to travel with the team because it was chaos, seas of people that they're trying to navigate through, just absolutely wild. No one had ever experienced or seen anything like that, period, in the history of high school sports. And so that proximity to greatness and understanding, for me to see 17 and 18-year-old kids understand the power that was within their talent. Every single one of the top 7 kids on his team their senior year all had D1 scholarships in something, basketball or something else, whether it was football or, most of them were basketball. I think 2 of them had D1 scholarships in football. The other 5 were basketball. So yeah, it was cool. We stayed connected. I talked to him his rookie year. His mom, I got season tickets to the Cleveland Cavaliers his rookie year, seats right below their box. So, after that was the last time I actually talked to him. So it was cool. I don't know why it happened. I'm still trying to figure out, that's one of the pieces where it hasn't, to me, in my brain, the way I keep going, okay, God, how are you bringing this back full circle? Cause it really doesn't have this close yet. But yeah, we were tight, McDonald's All-American game. LeBron's grabbed me, take me back to the locker room, and, we're hanging out, hotels, hanging out in his room, watching him on ESPN. It's pretty wild.
Wow, that's crazy.
Sitting on a couch with him, watching him on ESPN and just going, man, the greatness, but at the same time, he's an 18-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid.
Yeah.
The level of maturity to understand the people that he kept around him. If you look back, LeBron's one of the few high-profile athletes that's been in the spotlight since he was 15 years old to now that has never been in the news with some marital
Scandal.
failure, some sort of big, just he's a bad person, he just did a really good job of, proximity, power is proximity. There's the people you keep around you, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and understanding that and keeping the right people around was really cool. And I got to learn that and see that firsthand and got to meet a lot of really, really neat people. Still connected to a couple of the guys that were on that team that went over and played professionally in Europe. Still connected to the coach. Some of the photos that I took were in a memoir he wrote a few years ago.
Wow.
And there was a documentary made called More Than a Game. And so if anybody wants to watch that, you will see me in that multiple times. I think 5 or 6 times. So I think I got maybe a minute and a half airtime altogether.
Wow, that's crazy. Man.
But
Is that streaming anywhere?
So it was, I believe that it is purchasable on one of the streaming platforms, whether it's Netflix or Amazon Prime. It's somewhere. It's called More Than a Game.
And looks like it's on Amazon, YouTube, free on Tubi.
Yeah, it's
I don't know what that
places.
is.
I don't have.
I'm gonna watch that, dude. That's cool.
Yeah, it was dope, man. It was, and when you watch that, everything in that's accurate. So the guy that shot that, the last half of the season, he traveled with the team as well. So he was a senior at Akron University, and that was his senior thesis project was this documentary on LeBron and Akron St. Vincent St. Mary, and it was never supposed to be a movie. But years later, they turned it into the movie, and LeBron scored the movie. So all the music in there is handpicked. LeBron's this huge music guy, so he helped score the movie, and it was a really that part of it was pretty cool. So yeah, that was the connection with LeBron. I didn't grow up with LeBron, didn't go to high school with LeBron, just owned a company that we worked with their school, and it was neat because I've been fortunate to meet a lot of high profile people and being business rooms with just bangers, and that experience has taught me like how to not fanboy and just be normal. Our church that we go to now, there's a lot of ex-Ohio State athletes that play for the Arizona Cardinals that go to our church, and like cool to hang out with them. And so just being around athletes has always been a thing. It's been something that's been exciting for me just as a sports guy. But yeah, that was definitely one thing that I haven't figured out. There's a lot of value that's come from it in terms of like, but for me, I don't feel like it's come full circle yet. And I have no idea what that means, but there was like never really this closure to that whole season. So we'll see. Maybe one of my kids is going to marry one of LeBron's kids. I don't know.
There you go. That's awesome, man. No, thanks for sharing that. So let's hear how you got into death care now.
Yeah. So I was partners in this company, drop out of college, run this company for 2 more years. And I met a girl at a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. My brother was playing in this basketball tournament. I was coming back from dropping out of college, like packed up my car, left West Virginia, stopped at my brother's 3-on-3 basketball tournament, and met this girl through a mutual connection. And we kind of hit it off. That was June 1st of 2002. And we dated for a couple years, and I got out of the partnership that I was in early 2004, knew I wanted to marry her. And she said to me, she's like, my dad is never saying yes unless you've got some sort of income. And I'm like, I mean, like, just got out of this partnership. We're good for a minute. Like, I'll figure out what's next. I'm not really like go to work 9 to 5 guy. And she's like, well, why don't you go to work for my dad? He needs a salesperson until you can figure out like what you're going to do next. I said, cool. What does your dad do? She said, he has a vault company. Now, I was 21 at the time, and I didn't ask any questions. I'm like, oh, bank vaults, piece of cake. Every bank needs one. People have them in their house, small ones, big ones, like whatever. No problem. So I called her dad, said, hey, Kaylee says you're looking for a salesperson. Like, I want to interview just like everybody else. And I said, to me, it's not a permanent thing. Like, I just, need something until I figure out what's next. And he's like, great, come in on Saturday. We'll do an interview. And so I show up to this concrete plant, and I read the sign. It says Wilbert Concrete Burial Vaults. And I remember thinking like, oh, they must make the bank vaults somewhere else. And so I walked in, and I said to the receptionist, I said, I'm here to apply for the bank vault sales position. My father-in-law pops his head out of the office, and he's like, what, bank vaults? What are you talking about? And I'm like, well, what's a burial vault? And he's like, come here. And he takes me out to the concrete plant and like explains what a burial vault is. I'm like, man, I had no freaking idea. And so I go to work for him. I was hired for sales, but I actually didn't start doing sales for 3 years. And I just learned the product. I did, probably the thing that I learned the most and he figured out was that manual labor is not my thing. Like pouring concrete, stripping molds. I'm not good at it. I cost that man more money than I probably ever made him, and things that I broke, and jackknifing vault carts and smashing motors, and like just manual labor wasn't my thing, but I had to learn the product. And funeral directors, like, so it was Southeast Ohio. I was calling on an 82-mile radius when I started making sales calls around Zanesville, Ohio. So that encompassed Columbus all the way over to like Wheeling, West Virginia, and everywhere in between. And so my father-in-law said, look, these funeral directors are never going to respect you if they don't see you out on a vault truck first. He's like, you got to be in the cemetery. You got to understand what they do outside of the funeral home serving a family before you can try to go into the funeral home and think that you know more than them when it comes to burial vaults. And so I spent 3 years on a truck, swinging a vault with the Wilbert Way, setting up tents, being out in the cemetery, and, a foot of snow and muddy, and met all of our customers, like being in the cemetery. And then it made a difference, like when I called on them. And so in 2007, October, I'd been at the vault plant for 3 years. It was like the 3-year anniversary of being there. My father-in-law said, hey, go make sales calls tomorrow. gave me a list of funeral homes to go see. And that was like kind of it. And so for me, I went back to when I was doing ad sales and I would pop into a funeral home for the first time. Like any good salesperson, like I always find something in their office that I could connect with outside of what I was selling and like build this relationship and have this conversation. And vaults were the same way. So I would go in to talk about vaults, but I'm finding something that we can communicate about. And what I learned is that most funeral directors had this, like their biggest problem in the business that they would explain to me is like, I don't know how to educate the consumer. Like, I don't know how to connect. Like if my consumer, you want me to sell better vaults, but if they knew what a burial vault was, I could probably sell better vaults. And when we're in an arrangement process, like I got 1,000 different things I could offer them, and I don't want to be a salesperson. And so like, if they were better educated before they came into the funeral home, like there would be better communication. And so I'm like, well, why don't you just put it on your, like start writing blog on your website and putting out content, not realizing that the majority of funeral homes in 2007 didn't know what the internet was, let alone have a website or an email address. And so that's when I, being entrepreneurial again, I was always looking for like, okay, where do I fit into this profession? Like where is my, like, am I going to be a vault guy the rest of my life? Probably not. I don't know if I'll ever get to own the vault plan or run the vault plan. Like I'm not a clock in, clock out guy. So like there's a time frame on how long I'm going to be a vault man. And so started just figuring out like what would help our customers. So I went to my father-in-law and said, hey, like, I have all this knowledge of how to market a business online from, online marketing is really what I was doing in my first company. Like I was selling ads and here's where they go on a website and here's how information gets on a website. Here's how information gets to people. Here's how, Google works. And like, you're finding how people find content, what resonates with people, like all this stuff. And I said, I have all this knowledge that has nothing to do with death care, but absolutely applies to where funeral homes are at and what they need. And I said, can I start a blog each morning? Like, will you give me an hour at the start of every day before I go make sales calls to write a blog and then publish it? And, I don't think I think he saw the bigger picture, but like the idea of like a blog and how it gets online, like building something, like was just like, he's like, whatever you need, just do it. So I did. That's when I bought the domain name connectingdirectors.com because I'm like, what is my ultimate goal? I want to connect funeral directors so they can share with other funeral directors. In my brain, like LinkedIn had just gone public, and that's what really like kicked it off for me. Like when I would do sales calls, my father-in-law would stop and get lunch, and I bought a USA Today out of the little machine for, at one point it was $0.25, then it went 50 cents, and it went to 75 cents. And I don't even know if they still sell USA Today's now, but I would buy USA Today and I would go straight to the money section, and then I would go to the sports section. And I read an article about LinkedIn going public at a $20 million valuation. And like, I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. $20 million. Now it's like, you can walk into a restaurant and write a business idea on a napkin and somebody will give you $20 million to go do it, which is just mind boggling to me. But so I'm like, okay, I could build something that like connects funeral directors, kind of like a LinkedIn, kind of like a Facebook, but quickly realized that like, I don't need to build something new that already exists. It's like Facebook already exists. LinkedIn already exists. Like, how do we just leverage what's already there and build the sliver that can be the conduit? Like, why do I want to create this other platform? And I actually did go down that road at one point. I built a website called cdsocial.com, and it functioned just like Facebook and LinkedIn, but it was just for funeral directors. And I don't even know how long it was around. It was like maybe 2 years.
I signed
one of
up.
those things that
I remember it.
Yeah. It's one of the failures, right? It's like one of those things you start and people don't remember and it didn't work. And because it was like, well, I'm already on this new thing, Facebook, or I'm on this other like, well, I don't want another platform that's like a social network that functions. So like just leverage what's there. But so I launched Connecting Directors as a personal blog. Shout out to Mike Turkowitz, which I believe Michael was your first PodCasket guest, kind of the godfather of websites. FuneralNet had this forum, this online discussion board that I found. And like, again, you're learning throughout, like, there's so many different things. Like value proposition. So I quickly learned that I could hop into this form and I could just spam it with connectingdirectors.com and people would come and sign up. And then I'm like, well, that's zero value. So then what I started doing is just going in and finding discussions around things that I could add value to, and I would spend hours in that form answering questions and providing value. Like, nobody knew who I was. Anybody that was reading it assumed I was a funeral director. And then, like, you had your tagline, so people could click on your profile and they would see connectingdirectors.com. And at that point, connectingdirectors.com was like behind. The only way you could read the content is you had to put in an email address. And the platform I was using, I don't even think it's around anymore. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like some membership platform. Like, you build a blog and like you can sell memberships, and we never did. It was always free, but you just had to put your email address in. But anytime I would post an article, it would automatically email out to everybody that was subscribed. And so that's how I started distributing content. And after a year, we had 1,000 subscribers. So shout out to Mike Turkowitz, because Turk is how I got those first 1,000 subscribers, just adding value in the Funeral Net discussion board. And I would look for anywhere online where I think Forethought kind of like had something that, or Trust 100, somebody else had like a website where you could, there were like maybe a couple hundred funeral directors there, and I would just answer questions. And so, like, there, again, it solidifies, like, if you've got something of value and you can give people something that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise, like, you don't really have to sell. And like, we built multiple companies now in death care of just giving ridiculous amount of value. And I think that you've been a big driver of that for me, because I've watched, you create products early on, from funeral recordings all the way up through now, where you've built things to solve a problem and never really crazy, like, been the sales person. I watch you from a distance have conversations on webinars, have conversations with funeral directors at conventions, been around you enough in different meetings and things to like watch you navigate. Like, you give just such a ridiculous amount of value. Like, even on the webinars that we do, it's like a playbook of how to build a website company in death care. And it's like this insane amount of value. And when you give more than you get back, like, people respect that. And so, like, that was really Connecting Directors in how we built, was just give value. I'm writing article content based on conversations I'm having with funeral directors and just going, okay, here's how, online marketing, here's how to have a conversation with the consumers, how to use email. And so over the course of a year, we get 1,000 subscribers. I go to my first NFDA in 2009. My father-in-law, I was lucky enough for him to just like fund me going to NFDA, getting a booth. And,
was that
we
your
got
first
up to
booth, 2009 at New Orleans?
2009.
No,
maybe it's 2008.
You were in Orlando.
Orlando was, that was the first one. 2008, Orlando. Yeah. And then New Orleans. So yeah, he funded me going, and he was the first, we'll call him investor. He gave me seed money to build out Connecting Directors, and I made him a deal like, hey, I will pay you back the money you give me plus 20% before I ever take any type of profit. And I did. So like, from ad sales, like the first 2 years of ad sales on Connecting Directors, just gave it to my father-in-law, paid him back. And to me, that was important to not like take advantage of that. He was the last person I would wanted to ask for money, but he kind of funded it. And yeah, man, it was cool. I think after 2009, we had 5,000 subscribers. And I started getting kind of exposure, like people started knowing who I was. In the very first video, like, I get asked a lot, like, when did you decide you were not going to wear a suit? Like, you were just going to be the guy that, because when I did sales calls for my father-in-law, I had to wear a suit, tie, cufflinks, the whole nine, take out the earrings, clean shaven. And I took that the first year I was at NFDA, wore a suit. Second year, I wore a suit because that's what I knew about death care. And the first video I put online was in the summer of the late fall of 2009. So right after NFDA, I don't even remember what the video was about. And it was a conversation I had at NFDA, and I was thinking about it on a Saturday, and I'm like, I don't have time to write an article. And I just got my first webcam. So I'm like, I'll just shoot a video in my basement. So I was in my basement, backwards hat, t-shirt, Saturday morning, kick on the webcam, record this video, put it on Connecting Directors. And I don't even know where that video is now. We've tried to find it. It's not in an archive anywhere. I think when we rebuilt the site, like, backing things up was not what it is now back then. And it's gone somewhere. But I
think, sorry, but you're making me think. I need to put the picture of you in that blue shirt. That was like the first social profile.
The headshot.
That needs to be on this podcast episode. I think that's the photo
somewhere.
we're going to have to put on this flash. I've got it. Don't worry. I've got it. And I just upscaled it. So it's going to.
I went to a local photographer. Like I had like this embroidered on there. And like, that's what I wore to like the Ohio convention was my very first convention. And then NFDA in 2008. And like, that's what so goofy. What a turd.
Oh yeah, man. No, that's going to be the photo. I'm going to have our graphic designer put that on a podcast episode. Everyone's like, who is that? So sorry. Yeah, sorry. I interrupted you. You made that video, and then you got roasted by the industry, right?
I got absolutely destroyed. Like, all these people that have followed me for 2 years were like, man, you buffaloed us. Like, we thought you were a funeral director. If you walked into my funeral home, I would throw you out. So undignified. I mean, somebody even said, I can't believe I ever listened to anything that you had to say. Like, I absolutely got annihilated to the point where my wife was like, I got home that night and she was like looking at all the comments. She's like, are you going to be okay? I'm like, what? What do you mean? She's like, people are absolute. I mean, it was hundreds of comments. And there was one guy that was from Canada. I can't even remember his name. I don't think he's online anymore. That hopped in, was like, I can't believe you guys are roasting this dude. Like, you've literally hung on every word every day that he's wrote. And just because he doesn't look like us, all of a sudden everything is discredited. Like, that's crazy. One guy out of hundreds. And so my wife is like, are you good? I'm like, oh, this is great. She's like, what do you mean this is great? I'm like, this is it. She's like, what do you mean this is it? I'm like, I'm so uncomfortable wearing a suit. Like, I hate it. I only do it because I have to do it when I make sales calls for your dad. And so, like, I'm like, this is it. I'm not wearing a suit again. She's like, they're going to hate you. I'm like, yeah, but it's me. Like, this is authentically who I am. That backwards hat and t-shirt is who I am. Like, that is me. I don't want a suit and tie. And so I went to my father-in-law. I said, hey, when I do my thing and represent my brand, I'm going to dress this way. When I, make sales calls for you and do your thing, I'll wear the suit and tie and, respect your wishes. And he's like, deal. And so that was the turning point of when I stopped wearing a suit and just, that fashion's evolved. I had a period of time where, I was wearing all the blinged out clothes because that's what I was personally wearing. And in that company, two brothers out of California just started making me custom disrupt stuff that was blinged out. And like, that was cool. They went out of business over COVID. So like, that kind of stopped. Fashion's kind of shifted away from the blingy things. So it's just like, everyone asks is if the way that I dress is a marketing stunt. And I wish that I could say it was this creative brainchild of like, okay, we're just going to be so far out that, and it wasn't. It was just, this is who I am. Like, it's authentic to me. And if I'm asking, I believe in anything, authenticity wins. So, that goes back to giving more than you get. And, all those principles, like the authenticity of Jesus. Jesus was who he said he was, and his yes was his yes, his no was his no. And so like, I've lived my life fully authentic like that. And if we're asking, funeral directors to be transparent in content and build trust, then I have to, it would be very unauthentic for me to play the part of what somebody wanted and show up in a suit just to make everybody happy. And so I just kind of planned the flag that I'm going to do me. And for probably the first from that point on, it worked against me 100% for probably the next, I think maybe like 2015, 16 is when it started the change of like, okay, this guy's been doing this long enough that this isn't a gimmick. Like this is just authentically who he is. And like you keep the same narrative for long enough, people finally realize that it's not a joke and it's just, it's real. And so now I think it helps us. But it definitely worked against me for the first 8 or 9 years, 10 years.
See, we looked like we were going out on a limb with the lime green shirts and abandoning the shirts and ties, but you had done that. So it was like, well, I think it kind of, made us seem a little more conservative. It's like, well, at least we don't look like that guy,
Yeah, it's right. It's right. So that's it, man. It's like, be authentic. Like there's one thing that we really preach to our kids, and it's like, your yes is your yes, your no is your no. Like, be who you are. Your character will always carry, anyone can say anything they want about you whenever they want to say it, however they want to say it. They can make up whatever they want. Your character will always come through at the end and always serve you. Like that, like that's what you have is building a strong, authentic character. And like some people authentically are just bad people. Honestly, like I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like that's who you are. I don't think that's who God created you to be, but like you own it and you're just a mean person. Fine. That whatever. Like I'll respect the authenticity. But it's like that was a big game changer, and that really led into a lot of exposure from that. Like that video really popped off. A lot of people saw it, started getting asked then to speak at state conferences and different things. I think the Independent Funeral Directors of Florida 2010, the summer of 2010 was my very first 2-hour CEU presentation, which was an absolute disaster. I think 95% of the room was asleep by the end of that 2 hours. And shortly after that, August of 2010, I was making sales calls for my father-in-law and was hit head on. And some people remember this because we put it on Connecting Directors, but a lot of people don't. It was a big turning point. Like a girl was texting, went left to center, hit me head on. It was the only time in 8 years of making sales calls for my father-in-law that I drove my personal vehicle. That was an SUV. I had a company car that was a Nissan Maxima. And had I been in that, the likelihood that we were doing this interview is slim to none. But because I was in a Yukon Denali, and again, I look at where God's had his thumbprint on my life all the way through. Like I happened to take my personal car to work that day because I wasn't going to make sales calls. And he was like, hey, I need you to run and go make sales calls and go see this guy. And so I was on my way there and got hit head on, vehicle flipped over, broke my right femur in 3 places. Couldn't walk for 6 months, wheelchair, all the things. We had to move in with my in-laws who luckily lived across the street from me because everything I needed was on one level. Like I couldn't go up and down stairs. My leg was in like this huge brace and couldn't bend. I couldn't bend it for 6 months. And I had this dream, and I don't know if it was the painkillers or it was actually God. I really believe it was God. But I had a dream that I was supposed to start a social media agency for funeral homes. And I can't give myself a shot, even to this day. Like I just can't. And I had a blood thinner shot I had to take every morning, and you had to take it at the same time. And the hospital had been giving it to me at 6 a.m. in the morning. And so my wife every morning would wake up at 6 a.m., give me a blood thinner shot, and then go back to bed. And I remember one morning waking her up and going, hey, I had this dream last night. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I really feel God saying that we're supposed to start a social media agency for death care. And at that point, she was like, with what time? And she's like, I mean, I'll support you, but I don't know what time you have to do that, because I was working for her dad from 8 to 4:30. I would come home from 5 to, 3, 4 in the morning, and I would build Connecting Directors. And literally every single day. I mean, you know what it's like to build from absolutely nothing. And I was a horrible dad. Like I remember when my leg was broke, like being on the couch, and the kids were, it's 2010. So my oldest was 4, my youngest was 2. they were playing on the floor, and they're like, "Dad, get on the floor, play with us." And I physically couldn't get off the couch onto the floor. And I remember going, "Oh my," like I did not, just broke down, because up until that point, I looked at playing with them on the floor as just like annoying. Like I just got to buy time till they go to sleep so I can go back down to the basement and start working. And so there was a big shift. She was just like, "Hey, with what time?" And so there's we could do a whole another podcast episode on, we'd just call it marriage, and talk about how to ruin a marriage as an entrepreneur, and then the grace of God build it back. Because I did all the things that were wrong building a business to destroy a marriage. I never cheated on my wife or anything immoral like that, but just the lack of being present, the lack of attention, come home from the full-time job, go in the basement, maybe eat dinner, maybe tuck the kids in. You go up when your wife goes to bed, you lay there for 30 minutes till she falls asleep, you slip out, and you're in the basement till 4:00 in the morning, sleep for 2 hours, get up at 6:30, go to the full-time job. And like for 5 years, every single day, like that was literally it. And then, it was connecting directors, and then it was disrupt. And in 2012, I said, I don't have enough time, and left the family vault company, which was originally a plan. Like I wasn't going to be there forever. And, my father-in-law said, when you can make it on your own, it's time for you to go and build. He's like, you're entrepreneurial or not. You're not going to be here and work for somebody the rest of your life. And so I'm super grateful he allowed me to start 3 companies while I worked for him, if we count CD Social that failed. So 2012 is when I went full time with Disrupt and connecting directors.
That's awesome, man. And it's cool. I mean, it's cool to hear that you're going through this, because for me, it's like the last few years of this are like memory lane. Cause I remember you at the trade show with the wheelchair. Right. And I remember the, the embroidered shirt to the change in outfits and everything. I remember all that, and I remember CD Social, and I remember signing up for that. And I'm sure you and I communicated online, for a while before we'd ever talked on the phone. And yeah, it was just, that's just like another lifetime ago. It's crazy. But
it is wild. I think San Antonio 2010 was the first, I think it was ICCFA. The first time in person we like sat down, had lunch.
I remember your dad was there too, right? Working the booth with you.
Those are the days where we were sneaking inside doors to carry things in, so we didn't have to pay shipping, and all the good stuff. So it's been a journey, man, and it's like, I don't know, like there's a lot that's happened since 2012 in the brands, and other things that have been created, other things that didn't work. Like 2013, 14, started a crowdfunding site for death care, because I was tired of going to conferences and seeing new companies, and then going like the next year not be there because they ran out of money, and private equity was not in death care in 2014. So I built this crowdfunding site called SoFund us. It was like the principle was like, if you love it and you want to support it, then fund us. And funeral homes could buy discount. I don't know. We had 2 successfully funded campaigns in like 2 years, and then we shut that down. So like it.
Yeah, and you did.
It's really cool.
You
like
still got death care jobs, right? Is that still getting
death care jobs? And it's still the number one place to put job openings, and we're building out right now where people can upload resumes. So mortuary college students can build profiles, upload resumes for free, or anyone really that wants to put their resume out there, and funeral homes can view everybody that has an uploaded resume and actually reach out to funeral professionals through the platform as well. And so, it is quietly still kind of out there, and still the only dedicated website for death care related jobs. And it's been really cool to like go to conferences and talk to funeral directors that got hired through death care jobs, and companies that found great employees through death care jobs. Like that's cool to hear. It's just been like, I get asked a lot, like why I'm still in death care. Like, like we work with a couple brands. 90% of our business is still 100% death care. And, like there's an attraction for businesses outside of death care because of the creative nature of like just how we look at marketing from a creative standpoint. Like, man, if you can sell a funeral through Facebook ads, then like, this boat anchor or this car trash bag ought to be a piece of cake. And it really is. And people hire us for the different way we look at just creative in general. Some of the campaigns that we've created are pretty ridiculously awesome. And so I get asked a lot, like, why have you not just deviated away from death care? Death care seems so hard. And honestly, it's like, it is hard. Like every day it's a struggle, like to get, I feel like we're still, I can go speak to a group of business owners outside of death care and they get what we do immediately. And it's like, it's a wrap. They get it. They're ready to throw money at it. They want something different. And I speak 20 times a year at conferences to funeral homes, and it's still like people asking the same questions from 10 years ago. And, it's so far behind. And a lot of the ideas that we have and we throw out, like, people are like, that's wild and crazy. I would never do that. But at the end of the day, like, it's what's going to work. Best known is better than best. But why am I still in death care?
What's the most creative like ad campaign you've been allowed, I guess is the word I would use, to do with a funeral home? Like something come to mind where it's like you did, they were doing something different.
With a funeral home, a series of billboards, honestly, like, so like video content's been wild for clients, and it's not anything that's really crazy, but it's like, can we create a video where the hook is, do you want to be buried with or without pants? And we turn that into a pre-need video that actually drives pre-need. And yes, we've done that. And so to me, that's wild and crazy. Just getting funeral directors to create video content like this. And it's wild. It's cool because we use Riverside, and that's how we record remotely. And we do all these different things with clients that, get them out of a suit and tie, get them in an arrangement room going, this is the ugliest urn that we sell. Because the consumer just, like, it immediately starts to open up their mind. And so when we bring, like, there hasn't been anything wild and crazy. Like, the idea is that if I had a funeral home, like, I would literally wrap my hearse graffiti and I would drive it around town. If it's going to sit in the garage 5 days a week, why not let it sit in a parking lot 5 days a week where people are going to see it? Like, why are we not doing things that just get exposure? So for me, one of the coolest campaigns, we'll just go traditional, has been a television commercial that we produced for a client in Ohio that talks about him being a Bob Ross inspired speed painter. We went to his house and like filmed him gardening and like eating donut. Like, it's just funny, but it produced 17 at-need calls in 45 days that we could attribute back to that single video on Facebook.
Wow.
Like, that's been cool. But recently it's been a billboard campaign with a client. Super great funeral home in York, Pennsylvania, small community, 60 call firm a year and a half ago, on track to do 120 calls this year. So double business inside of 18 months. And social has been the pop off of that. Like, that's where they started building exposure. And now that's bled into us doing traditional creative for them and just thinking outside the box. So like, my favorite billboard that we created for them, if you think about a traditional funeral home billboard, traditional funeral home ad just is, hey, here's a picture of the funeral home. Here's a picture of our staff serving the community for 100+ years, 50 generations. Here's our phone number. Here's our address. Here's our website. All on this billboard that we expect people to drive by and remember. And all of a sudden, like, and the logo is like super small. Like, you don't even know what funeral home it is most of the time, but there's nothing on that billboard that's memorable. And to me, marketing should grab attention. Like, it should be memorable. So like, we did a billboard for a client. It's just her face on a third of it, real big. And it says, this is an ad for a funeral home. And then has the logo really huge. That's it.
Awesome.
And like, they've gotten more feedback And we ran social campaigns that mapped. We did these scavenger hunts of like, hey, we'll give away a $150 Visa card to anybody that can comment where our 5 billboards appear across the county. You got people pulling over, like taking selfies with the billboard and posting it and tagging the funeral home. Like, to me, that's where a funeral home wins. Whoever embraces the dopest creative and focuses on creative first will absolutely win, because best known is better than best. You can't prove that you're the best if you don't serve more people. And you could, Curtis, you and I could go partner. We could build the Taj Mahal of funeral homes. We could, build this $20 million facility. We could do everything digital. We could have holograms of the, spinning hologram fans of the deceased. And we could like do all these wild and crazy things. But if nobody knows, it doesn't matter. And we've like, I go back to Bible school and go, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, put it on a bushel. No, like, but that's what we do. We put our funeral home, like we go dignity. We can't do that because it's not dignified, and this isn't dignified, and that's not dignified. Like, I don't know what dignified means, and neither does anybody else. The consumer never uses that word. So, but we put this cover over the funeral home, and all of a sudden we can't do things that normal businesses do because we're a funeral home. And to me, that makes zero sense. So, that's been fun. There's a casket company that we work with that's, goes direct to consumer, and we get to throw out the wildest, craziest ideas like there was I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but like there was like a couple weeks ago, like a month ago, Yeti and Liquid Death partner on this casket cooler,
that was
right?
Nuts. Yeah, nuts.
So we pitched that idea to Liquid Death a year and a half ago. Wow. It was for the casket company. Casket company buys in. We go pitch it to Liquid Death. Liquid Death now runs with it and goes partners with Yeti on their own, and they create this wild campaign, cut the casket company out. But like those are the ideas that we get to throw out that are really fun and wild and crazy. And there's nothing proprietary in marketing, so there's nothing you can do, right? It's just brain power and ideas. And so when we get the opportunity to do fun, like most of our clients won't do it, but like, let's show a picture of a casket side by side and go, most expensive candy dish ever, cheapest casket you can buy at our funeral home. And it's the same casket, but if used in different, and it's Halloween. So it's a Halloween themed. It's like those are the fun things that we get to do. But like, I just think of creative differently. Like, I want a funeral home. Like, okay, if anybody's listening to this and you want a wild and crazy direct mail campaign, because I do think direct mail still has value if the creative is different. Like, I still go through every piece of mail that we get at our house, and I don't open 99% of it. I'll throw it away. But if the creative was really good, I would probably still open it. I think creative always wins. And that's really like being a social agency, whatever you want to call us. Like, at the end of the day, we're just a creative agency. Like, the growth of our company has come from working with suppliers like Tukios and Legacy and Live Oak Bank, and being able to do things that are creatively different than ever done before. But I still think that if a funeral home did a pre-need campaign that was just like, a 5x7, and on the front of it said, there's 100% chance you will need this, and you opened it up and it was just the funeral home logo, and that was it. There's no burial, cremation. If you think about direct mail campaigns for funeral homes, it's paragraphs and paragraphs of information that nobody ever reads, but nobody will forget opening that up. And they may be offended right away. Yeah, absolutely. Like, 99% of people that watched my very first video online were offended because I had a backwards hat and t-shirt, but it's still the greatest thing that leveraged shaping who we are and who I am in this profession. And people may hate it, but they're not going to forget it. And at the end of the day, best known is better than best. And so, to me, that's my drive. That's why I'm still in death care. I care. I couldn't do what a funeral director does day in and day out. No way. I've sat on both sides of the table. I've made arrangements with a funeral home just to see how at-need arrangements work, how pre-need arrangements work. I've made pre-need arrangements with my grandparents. I frankly didn't like either side of the table. And so I couldn't do what they do day in and day out. But if I can help brands, funeral homes create content that is transparent, builds more relationships through engagement with the consumer, makes it easier for the consumer to reach out to them because there's a different comfort level. 80% of funeral home business is driven by some pre-existing relationship. We can't go to every service organization anymore and shake hands, and nobody goes to those meetings. So you're shaking less hands even if you do go. This is the way you can shake hands at scale. You can build relationships. They can learn about you. There's 81% more trust when you can see somebody's eyes. You know, it's part of the reason there's value in recording this and putting it out on YouTube and still having audio format. Like, that's where I still see there's so much value. I care a lot about this profession. Because would it be easier to jump ship and just, I could make infinitely more money if I just went outside death care, but that's never been a driver. I mean, you know, I get asked all the time, why don't you just have an automated $300 a month service or $99 a month service where you just sell content to a funeral home and you could work with thousands of funeral homes and make more money? Because it's never going to change the outcome of their business. It's not. Now, if they engage with the consumer through video and they build relationships and they do things differently and they're top of mind, like, that absolutely changes the outcome of the business. They'll serve more families. Just content for the sake of content is never going to do that. And I'm just not at the point where I'm willing to sacrifice principle and you know, the mission for making more money.
Yeah. What do you think this looks like 10 years from now? Like death care?
Man. I think that we get away from talking about burial and cremation. Like, I think that if we hang our hat on burial, like if we hang our hat on the disposition, burial, cremation, alkaline hydrolysis, you know, natural organic reduction, whatever, we get away from that and we just focus on service and we focus on, you know, what it is that we can provide for a family. Because you think 95% of the time a funeral home is with the living, not the dead. But we focus. I think
honestly, if you could take that chunk of advice and say, what could a funeral director do today? My advice would say, don't ask burial or cremation in the first 3 questions. Like, kick it way out.
Yeah.
Go straight to service, like you're talking about. Say, how would you like to honor your loved one? Start with that. But even just like on the online, you know, arranger tools and stuff, it's a lot of times like burial or cremation. It's like, don't lead with that. Like, that's the last thing.
Yeah.
It's the last thing you do. So don't make it the first thing in the conversation, because it's going to, you know, even the market at this point, the consumers are thinking that cremation is different than burial in terms of what you can do and provide in terms of service and all that. But I think that's good advice. Sorry, I cut you off though.
No, that's, I mean, and to that point, like we had a client that did, you know, we went through like a festival in their town and we just did like man on the street style content of like, what do you want for your funeral? And out of dozens and dozens of people that we asked, nobody ever said whether they wanted cremation or burial. They just talked about the service. They just talked about I want a band and I want a keg and I want, you know, I don't want to have it at a church, but I want a pastor there. Like, my favorite park is this park. And like, I would love to have my funeral. Like, nobody said anything about burial or cremation. So like, I think we get away from that and we start realizing that we're in the service business. And yes, funeral homes get a body from A to Z, but we focus more on the service aspect of it. And we do things that are, you know, like, I remember posting a picture of a Tesla concept hearse or something like years ago on Connecting Directors. And like, multiple people said, that's undignified. My funeral home would never do that. I don't know what that really means. And so we get away from that. Like, we're still professional. We're still, you know, there is a there is a sacredness to what a funeral home does, and a preservation of like history and honor, and all those things reign true. But we focus on the service side, and funeral homes start to act like normal businesses. In the next 10 years, I will own a funeral home. I don't want to be the guy that meets with the family and does the arrangement. I just want to be the guy that has free reign on the marketing. And we just do all the wild and crazy things that I have in my brain, and prove that because we've proven that it works at scale on not the wild and crazy things, but things that push the envelope on creative. And I think if a funeral home just went all in, and really, were who they were and super authentic and created content the same way the content is that they engage with online from other businesses, and just embraced more exposure and the service side of things. Yeah. I think you could have a creative campaign for a funeral home that was all it was a funeral director talking about wild and crazy places you could have a funeral and things you could do with a funeral. Whether it's building, you document building a model rocket with your grandchildren, and then you shoot that rocket off, and then you're also like, oh, and by the way, did you know that you could send cremated remains into and you just talk about the service side of things. And like, did you know you could have a funeral down by the river? You could have a funeral at a farm. You could have a funeral at a baseball stadium. You could have a funeral, on the top of a mountain. Wherever you want to have a funeral, you can celebrate life. And we just went there. We just focus on that. And I really think that that's where death care goes in the next 10 years, because if we continue to focus on cremation and burial, the cost difference there, that's where funeral homes struggle. You got funeral homes now doing more calls than they've ever done before, but cash flow is less because 55% of it is cremation. And we haven't figured out yet that if we attach success of business to selling a casket in a vault, that's a bad thing to attach it to, because those are commodities. They're not value-driven items. Service is value-driven. And you got to open the mind of the consumer of what's possible with a funeral, because they don't know. And we don't think about it. It's really no different than a wedding. You can elope for a wedding, you can elope for a funeral. You can have a preacher, you cannot have a preacher. You can have every aspect, a photographer, a videographer, you can have cake, you can have a dance, you could anything you do with a wedding. What if a funeral had a dollar dance, and the dollar dance, raised money for the family to pay for the funeral expenses, just like you do at a wedding? I don't it. It's no different, but we look at it as like this. So, and I don't know, that's a really long answer. 10 years. I think technology wins. I think, I talk about Tukios a lot with funeral homes because, one of the things I respect so much about you is you give everybody a peek under the hood. You really do. We'll get on a webinar and you'll lay out, hey, this is kind of the roadmap for Tukios and what we're building and what we're doing. And to me, the ability to we're not going to create things that are so wild and crazy that funeral homes are never going to use. We're just going to go step by step and start making every single thing that you do easier and remove friction. And that's ideally what we're doing with clients on the marketing side is let's remove friction around these conversations. And so I have so much respect for that. So I think technology continues to drive, we have to embrace it at scale because it is part of providing a better service. There's so many cool things that you can do with technology, and, your website is always going to be the front door to the funeral home online. There's no way around that. It has to be paramount in a marketing conversation, and it needs to be the hub for everything. When I sit down with churches, I'm like, hey, let's stop spending 15 minutes on announcements. Let's give the 3 highlights and then direct everybody to a video that sends them to the website. If you want more information on this, you got to go to the website and fill out this form and scan this QR code or fill out the funeral home website needs to be the hub. Everything that they do needs to be connected. That's the nucleus. So, I think we start to embrace that more. I still think we're probably 5-10 years behind, where technology really is and what funeral homes can do with websites. I think that, AI embraced the right ways can absolutely amplify what funeral directors do. Like AI is never going to embalm anybody. AI is never going to run a retort. AI is not, you still need some people there, but there's like so many other ways that AI can amplify what a funeral home does, from idea generation to execution to SOPs to, you've got SOPs for your business. We've got SOPs for our business. When was the last time you talked to a funeral home that had an SOP on how, an arrangement process should go, the questions you should ask, how the hearse gets like, start operating like normal businesses. And, how do you duplicate a great funeral home? If you buy another one, you got to have a great operating procedure. And, we just have to start thinking differently. Business has to be a part of the equation.
Yeah. The good news is, that's a very positive outlook, right? Like, where's it going to be in 10 years? You've got a very positive outlook of like, there is a huge opportunity here. Industry's not going away, right? Like the changes that need to be made are, I feel like, pretty minor. But it feels big, probably feels big to a funeral home to try to run more like a business and be a little bit more creative, but it's possible. And you're in an industry where people are curious, and how often is like, if a funeral home does step out of the box a little bit with their marketing, does it make national news? It happens. Like anytime it happens, it happens. Like, cause it's so unusual. And so really, like, all of us, I think that, would love to have that kind of an opportunity, with our own companies. Like, if we do something crazy right now, it's going to get national news. Like, nothing at Tukio's is going to do that. But like a funeral home, could, like,
100%.
French ran that Yodo, like that Yodo billboard, like that made national news, and it happens, right? And so there really is, there's a great opportunity. I think it's a hopeful future. Well, this has been awesome, Ryan. Thanks, man. I think like this is going to be, I think people are going to be excited to hear this side of your story that hasn't been told as much. So I just want to thank you for spending your time with me today. And just how then, we need to get a little call to action here for you. Is somebody wants to get a hold of you? You're pretty easy to get a hold of, but you can tell them.
I'm pretty easy to find. Like, Google me. You'll find 1,000 different ways to reach out. Instagram. My email address is ryan@disruptmedia.co. That's easy. You can go to our website. You can go to any social profile, DM. It's not hard to find me. And, I do care deeply about the profession 100%. I don't think that there's ever been, I look back at I think it's 20 years now since I first stepped into death care. I don't think that there's been more opportunity in 20 years than there is right now. And so when you say positive outlook, I have a insanely positive outlook, because I think like everything up to this point has been like trial and error. It really like there's so much opportunity to do things differently and think differently. The consumer's in a different headspace when it comes to brands being more creative. They're more open to talk about death than they've ever been open to talk about death. It's, less taboo. Like there's so much opportunity at scale for funeral homes to control the narrative around what people think about death care. And, at the end of the day, that's really the driver for me, is like the way that we approach marketing with a funeral home. I really feel like if more funeral homes approach marketing that way, collectively, it raises the perception of the profession, and it brings the consumer in tighter, because there's an open two-way conversation. I don't have to just talk to a funeral director when somebody dies. And, I think that it takes companies working together to do that. It takes a great, website provider like Tukio's. It takes great pre-need companies. It takes, great suppliers to be able to collectively build the profession and continue to push meet a funeral director where they're at, but continue to pull them up. And I think that's collectively as a supplier in the profession, that's a core responsibility, is like, we gotta meet the profession where it's at, but pull it up. And, I think that's on the radar of everybody that wants to win and cares about the profession. So, I appreciate the platform, man. I don't get to talk about my story a lot. Most people still think that I'm a funeral director. I'm not. I've never spent a single day as a licensed funeral director. I have zero intentions of ever being a licensed funeral director, but I do want to own some funeral homes and just go nuts. So
Yeah,
that'll happen.
yeah.
Somebody's going to give me the opportunity.
Man, I want to see the graffiti wrapped hearse. I think that'd be awesome. So,
It'd be a game
okay.
changer.
Well, thanks again, Ryan. This has been great. Thanks everybody for listening. And if you'd like to subscribe to PodCasket, you can find us on most places you find podcasts. So thank you.
If you're listening to this and you haven't subscribed, why? Just hit the subscribe button. It doesn't matter what platform, just subscribe, man. Because these have been great. I've learned so much about some of the people that I've been networked with for so many years. That just, it's the beautiful thing about death care is that there's such a family aspect to it. Like when you ask about my kids and I ask about your kids, we know each other genuinely cares how the other person's family is. So to hear a lot of these stories of, you call them legends. I don't know if I fit into that category, but
whatever. Some
of the legends you've had on, man, of and you're part of that as well. So it's been cool, man. I really love what you're doing and it's been pretty neat. So subscribe. Dang, come on.
Thanks, Ryan. This is a selfish thing for me because I've been loving these stories myself. But anyway, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you.
All right, man.
Join us, say it. Welcome to PodCasket.